the price of food is going way up. My daughter has 5 children, and they're reduced to eating noodles and rice and trying to stretch the budget. And I thought through phase 1 and 2, the prices would be frozen, but they are not. They are still going up.
I don't like the present wage price formula. It's not working. It's loaded against the side of working people, and it's not protecting consumers.
The Secretary of Agriculture said we should eat fish, but fish is $1.79 a pound. That doesn't help very much.
The wage and price control program under Nixon is a very lopsided operation in which they've been fairly effective in holding down the income of working people and freezing the wages, but the price control part of it's been a disastrous failure, and you're reminded of that every time you go to a supermarket.
Most of us feel that our property taxes are awfully high, and we'd really like to know what you have in mind to provide some relief.
The ordinary family can hardly own their own home anymore, or their own business, or their own farm. I talked to a woman at Kenosha, Wisconsin during the primary election last spring. As I recall it, she was paying more than 1/3 of her entire income to support the property tax on the little house that she lived in. She had an income of about $1,700 a year, and the property tax on her house was $570 a year.
If ever we get up enough for a down payment, I don't know if we could pay the property taxes, we'll be ready to retire.
The only way I can see to reduce that load is for the federal government to move in and pick up a heavier share of the services that the states and cities are now carrying. The great injustice in the tax laws are in these loopholes that permit some of the richest people to pay little or no taxes at all, and that's not right. That money is one source of money that you could use to take some of the pressure off the middle-income taxpayer.
I'm a working man, and I work 40 hours a week just like everybody else. And it seems like if I get a Saturday, get a little overtime, let's say I get $70, $75. You know, exactly half of that overtime goes to taxes. I am really working for nothing.
You ever ask yourself where that tax dollar goes? We used to run the United States government back in the days of Franklin Roosevelt on about $10 billion a year. We've spent $150 billion on Vietnam alone. We're spending $80 billion on the Pentagon every year. The President wants another $4 billion added on this year, beyond what we were spending last year on military operations. I think you ought to ask yourself where that tax dollar's going.
My nephew was killed over in Vietnam about 2 years ago. Yeah. Now I understand we're going to go to Russia now and help develop their country. And the Chinese are worried about you getting in.
Campaign with their hard-earned dollars. Send what you can to McGovern.
He's continuing the bombing, not to get our men out of prison, but to keep General Tu in power. And that's a price I'm not willing to pay. And let me just add one thing. One of the great problems that we've had in the leadership of this country is that we have had too many people that were unwilling to change their mind when they got new evidence. They were afraid they'd lose face, and so they wouldn't change. Now, I think we need a president who isn't afraid to say, I'm going to change my mind. I made a mistake. And sometimes you ought to be able to say to the people, this is not going to be popular, but this is what we're going to have to do to save our country. You have to make those hard decisions.
McGovern, Democrat, for the people. The people are paying for this campaign with their hard-earned dollars. Send what you can to McGovern for president.
Moscow, May 1972. Richard Nixon becomes the first American president ever to visit the Russian capital. The historic 5-day trip proves to be a working visit where firm agreements are formed between the two great powers. Late in the week, the Russian government provides President Nixon with a unique opportunity, A chance to report on this progress directly to the Russian people on live television.
We have agreed on joint ventures in space. We have agreed on ways of working together to protect the environment, to advance health, to cooperate in science and technology. We have agreed on means of preventing incidents at sea. We have established a commission to expand trade between our two nations. Most important, we have taken an historic first step in the limitation of nuclear strategic arms.
The agreements do not come easily. President Nixon, Secretary Rogers, and Dr. Kissinger spend long hours hammering out terms that are equal for both countries and beneficial to all countries. In his TV address, the president speaks to the Russians of the American people.
In many ways, the people of our two countries are very much alike. Like the Soviet Union, ours is a large and diverse nation. Our people, like yours, are hardworking. Like you, we Americans have a strong spirit of competition, but we also have a great love of music and poetry and sports and of humor. Above all, we, like you, are an open, natural, and friendly people. We love our country. We love our children. And we want for you and for your children the same peace and abundance that we want for ourselves and for our children.
Earlier in the week, President and Mrs. Nixon traveled to Leningrad, where they walked through Pavlovsk, the ancient residence of the Tsars. In Kiev, they visit the Cathedral of St. Sophia. And in Moscow, Mrs. Nixon is entertained by the famous Russian circus. In Leningrad, President Nixon visits the Piskarov Cemetery, and he recalls that experience in his TV address.
Yesterday, I laid a wreath at the cemetery, which commemorates the brave people who died during the siege of Leningrad in World War II.
Older Americans have much to give this country. The best thing this country can give to them is the chance to be a part of it, a chance to play a continuing role in the great American adventure.
President Nixon was speaking of one of our country's most serious problems. America, for all its emphasis on progress, mobility, and youth, was not doing enough for its older citizens.
But I'm over 65 and I can do just as good a job as anybody else can do.
I think Social Security benefits shall rise and keep up with the cost of living.
Everything is sky high.
Today they have a struggle and want to live with the money that they get.
And we get Medicaid, which helps a lot. My husband's very sick.
Well, the main problem is having something to do.
The problems of old age are not new. Enough money to live on, taxes, inflation, job discrimination, the soaring costs of medical care. And more than anything else, a need to be useful, to belong in the mainstream of American life. Through the years, our older citizens have been virtually ignored by our government. When Richard Nixon was elected president, he called together the most ambitious White House conference on aging ever held.
Now, as we consider your suggestions, we will be guided by this conviction. Any action which enhances the dignity of older Americans enhances the dignity of all Americans. For unless the American dream comes true for our older generation, it cannot be complete for any generation.
This was not an empty promise. This was a call to action. The president proposed to the Congress some vital legislation. First, he would put a national floor under the annual income of every older American. He would raise the ceiling on how much a person can earn without losing his or her benefits. He would prevent job discrimination because of age. He would enroll everyone over 65 in the Medicare program and end the monthly premium of $5.80. Knowing how unfair soaring property taxes are to older Americans, he created a bold revenue-sharing plan. Federal tax revenues would be returned to the states to help stop the rise in property taxes. A home can represent a lifetime of careful savings, and this symbol of independence, he knew, could be crushed under the heavy burden of property taxes. The president got tough with substandard nursing homes and substandard medical care centers. He made nursing home reform a reality. He increased Social Security benefits 51% since 1969. He increased the budget for administration on aging 5 times what it had been. He said no more job discrimination because of age.
A few months ago, I met with a remarkable man. His name was George Black. When he came in to see me, he didn't look it, but he told me he was 93 years old. For more than 80 years, this man has been making bricks by hand, but his productive years were not over. And so our government sent this remarkable man to Guyana in South America so that he could share his skills with the people of that less developed country. And when I asked him about his trip, this is what he said. I've always asked the Lord to let my last days be my best days. I feel like he's answering my prayers. The time has come to close the gap between our older citizens and those who are not yet old. And the way to do this, I believe, is to stop regarding older Americans as a burden and start regarding them as a resource for America.
This is why we need President Nixon, now more than ever.